hijacked planes. Lord knows what is in store of us next in terms of biochemical and nuclear weapons. And so we have to begin to think about sacrificing some of the freedoms and the convenience that we used to experience on a day-to-day basis. That can no longer be the status quo.
All right, 1:30 Eastern Time. Let's go to Garrick Utley and get the latest news. Garrick?
Jack, what the quote of one of your panels just a minute ago reminded me of the old Field of Dreams saying, build it and they will come. When you look downtown, and I was down there today, the big question is in terms of real estate, rebuild, and will they come back? Well, we just don't know. It's going to be months and years before we can even think about that. But let's look at these live pictures down there. As we know, the human toll, 190 dead, another 4,900 missing. And meanwhile, just blocks away, Wall Street says it's getting ready to go back to work. 8 hours from now, the big bell in the New York Stock Exchange, the big board, will be ringing away and trading begins. In Washington, cleanup at the Pentagon continues there, just across the Potomac from Washington, D.C. The death toll there at the Pentagon stands at 188, 187 missing, and 2 confirmed dead. Earlier on Sunday, the Bush administration called on the leaders of the world to stand up and be counted.
The key here to keep in mind is that what we're asking nations to do, and which the PACs have clearly made a decision to do, is we're asking nations to step up and be counted. They're going to have to decide. Are they going to stand with the United States and believe in freedom and democracy and civilization, or are they going to stand with the terrorists and the barbarians, if you will? And it's a fairly clear-cut choice, and I'm delighted to see that Pakistan has, in fact, stepped up to the task.
Across the country, the manhunt continues with the FBI agents spreading out. Just a few hours ago, 2 arrest warrants were issued for 2 more material witnesses in Delray Beach, Florida today. The FBI has stepped up its search of this apartment complex. Authorities there believe at least 1, if not 2, suspected hijackers were living there. And finally, the long healing process begins. Americans lit candles across the country to mourn the victims from the attacks, the disaster last Tuesday. And as the vigils continue, President Bush is calling on Americans to do one very important thing, not only to get back to work, but to recreate a sense of normalcy in this country, normalcy in the United States, all 50 states. The president returned to the White House Sunday from Camp David, urging Americans to go back to work. He returned after meeting with his top security advisors at Camp David, discussing likely responses to last week's attacks. Meanwhile, the man the president has fingered as the prime suspect, Osama bin Laden, issued a statement on Sunday denying once again that he had any role in Tuesday's attacks. He says he's been living in the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan and following the rules and the laws of that country's leaders. Well, Jack, again, as we reported just a moment ago from Islamabad, correspondent Mike Chinoy there, the big story is the meeting taking place this Monday between the head of military intelligence of Pakistan and the Taliban leaders. Pakistan telling the Taliban, hand over bin Laden within the next 3 days or else. This is the real test, perhaps the last chance, it seems, according to informed observers there, to have a peaceful resolution to this. No one's giving high hopes that it's going to happen. Anyway, 3 days and counting until that deadline reaches us. Back to you.
Garrick, our sister network CNNI is promising shortly, in fact any time now, a live interview with the Pakistani foreign minister, presumably, hopefully, we'll see, but hopefully they'll have some information about that meeting between the Taliban and the Pakistani officials. Mansour, you've got close to $1 billion under management in your firm. How much equity exposure do you have?
Well, we're primarily invested in private equity transactions. So from a public stock market standpoint, I sort of got out of the public markets about 2.5, 3 years ago, primarily because we saw, when you've had that kind of a 5-year run, you don't kick a gift horse in the mouth and you say, all right, where can we go and do some more interesting things? And some of the things that we're trying to do right now include very novel internet paradigms that are designed to protect the internet security, infrastructure security in ways that have never been seen before.
Can you talk about what they are? Or is it...
Well, let me give you a hint, and that is that the ability to protect a computer up until now has depended on building these very elaborate firewalls.
Right.
Now what we're doing is, in fact, taking the internet address of the computer and moving it around in cyberspace so you can't find the computer. If you can't find it, you can't attack it. That's one thing we're doing. Other things we're doing, biomass conversion. We're very interested in satellite technologies. Telecommunications, I think, will have a resurgence as a result of these kinds of things because of what Patricia just said, which is that we've never used a teleconference capability anywhere in the world, and now I think we're going to do that. And in fact, Pakistan is a very good place to do that, as a matter of fact. And they're privatizing their telecom company. And if they survive this short-term crisis, I think there's a lot to be done in those kinds of countries to build their infrastructure out as well.
All right. Timothy, here in New York. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you getting along?
Oh, it's been a rough week.
Yeah, it has.
You know, I mean, as much as everyone's talking about the economy and everything, being so close to these two tragic events here in New York, being a Long Islander, I kind of felt like being trapped in a way.
That's why they shut the city down. You were trapped in a way. Were you out on the island when this happened, or were you in the city?
Yeah, I was out on the island at work. But basically, my question has to do with everything that has taken place on American soil, you know, not being a military strike as Pearl Harbor, but yet being terrorist attacks for, quote, personal interests, as Osama bin Laden has put it. Wouldn't it be rational and logical for the United States to close its doors for an extended period of time to allow the government to both scour the country of any and all illegal immigrants and also to devise a better system of security for the sole purpose of protection?
I don't know that that it's a practical idea, and I'm not an official, but a practical idea to seal off the borders. I do know that, I would expect, I would strongly suspect, that the examination of things like student visas will come under a little scrutiny. Apparently, some of these terrorists that hijacked these airplanes were attending flight schools here in the United States because they got into the country on student visas that are available as a part of the underground that serves the terrorist network. A little closer screening and checking and verifying identity on people that are in here, a little closer supervision perhaps while they're in the country. I don't know, but it's a subject that's got to be addressed because we have open borders, and if you're in the right area, you can come in and out of this country with virtually no problem at all. So,
but you know, closing the borders is not the right way to look at it. The right way to look at it is that it's time for the American people to get educated about the world they live in. That is what is fundamentally missing in this society, that for so long we just became complacent because we thought we didn't have any natural enemy. Now we understand that there's a real enemy there, and it's the responsibility of every American living in this country to understand precisely what Islam is, what does it teach, how do Muslims live, how do people who believe in these radicalized ideas, whether they're Muslims or not.
Sure.
What are they all about? This is our responsibility as people now. We have to do this.
You know, we had...
And Jack, sealing the borders is unrealistic.
Well, of course it is.
For all sorts of reasons, not least of which is that there's a huge demand for both legal and illegal immigration in this country.
I mean, wasn't Vicente Fox just in the country meeting with Bush about what to do with 3 million Mexican immigrants who work in this country and make a huge economic contribution
That's right.
to the...
And the idea of unleashing the INS, even if there was sufficient manpower, which there isn't, to go through the country and root out illegal immigrations is a prescription for a police state, and that is not what America is all about.
You know, we had, going back to the late 80s, I mean, we've had it awfully good in this country for the last 10 or 12, 13 years. Reagan and the lads who got together and got the Berlin Wall down and ended the Cold War. We had the situation in the Persian Gulf, which was short and clean, and there were not a lot of American casualties. Coming out of the 1991 recession, the stock market and the economy entered an unprecedented era of prosperity where people in this country got wealthy beyond their wildest dreams. And it was like, what me worry? I mean, there were no problems. Life was good. People were educating their kids and buying second homes and driving nice cars, and they had high-paying jobs. And that's, I think, part of the reason why this was such an emotional blockbuster to everybody. I mean, it's if we had been scraping and struggling, that had been, you know, it's like, here's one more thing. But such a contrast to the way life has been in this country, with the possible exception of the stock market. We're going to get, I think, CNNI now, are we not, Ellie? Are we ready to go to them? They have a live interview with a Pakistani foreign minister, and presumably we're going to at least hear some questions about the delegation for Pakistan that went to deliver ultimatums to the Taliban in Afghanistan demanding the return or handing over of Osama bin Laden. So let's go now to our sister network, CNNI, for that interview.
And at this point, we welcome our viewers in the United States as we go to Pakistan and examine its critical decision to back the United States as it zeroes in on the culprits of Tuesday's attacks. Joining us now is Pakistani Foreign Minister Abdul Sattar. Mr. Sattar, thank you very much for joining us. First, if we can start with what's going on right now in Kandahar. What's the Pakistani delegation telling the Taliban this day?
The Pakistani delegation at a high level will be conveying to the Taliban government of Afghanistan the imperative of compliance with Security Council resolutions, both those that have been adopted in the past and the one that was adopted on the 12th of September. That is our own policy, and we hope that the government of Afghanistan will act with responsibility in the terribly grave situation raised by these horrendous terrorist attacks in New York and Washington.
For those not familiar with the minutiae of Security Council resolutions, can you tell us exactly what those Security Council resolutions say?
The Security Council resolution calls for international cooperation by all states in the efforts to deal with the terrorists, organizers, and sponsors of these attacks in New York and Washington.
As one of a handful of countries...
Also, I think we should take note.
If I could just break in there for a moment, as one of the handful of countries that actually supports the Taliban regime, is that all that the delegation is going armed with? The UN Security Councils that have already been in place for some time? Or is Pakistan putting some extra muscle on the Taliban to surrender Osama bin Laden?
Well, Pakistan has always sought to give correct counsel. We have always emphasized in the past that it is important for Afghanistan and its people that the government should act in conformity with international law. Of course, the assumption that Pakistan is in a position to exercise complete influence is flawed in our opinion. We have constantly pointed out to our friends that we have diplomatic relations, but that doesn't necessarily translate into great influence. The decisions have to be made by the sovereign government of Afghanistan.
As seems likely, as many analysts are speculating anyway, it's very unlikely that the Taliban is going to surrender Osama bin Laden in the near future. Mullah Omar has only recently said that there's no way that's going to happen and has actually threatened retaliation if anyone attacks Afghanistan. What's Pakistan going to do then?
Well, Pakistan has taken very serious note of the threat that has been hurled against Pakistan. We are terribly saddened that a government and a country that we have regarded always as a neighbor, friend, should use such language against a neighbor which is quite clearly in their mind Pakistan. And I'm sure that the emissaries who have gone to Kandahar will take that up with the leadership in Kandahar.
So you feel that was actually a direct threat on Islamabad?
Meanwhile, well, if you read that statement very carefully, it was certainly aimed at Pakistan because the language, although veiled, left no doubt in our mind that the threat was against the government and people of Pakistan.
So the government's been threatened. The Pakistani government has also said that it will be part of the coalition against terrorism. So what's Pakistan actually going to do? Is it going to allow ground troops in Pakistan to stage attacks into Afghanistan if that so becomes necessary as far as the Pentagon is concerned? Will air bases be allowed to be used within Pakistan's borders? What exactly? Give us the specifics then of Pakistan's support for this international coalition.
The discussions that we have held with the government of the United States deal with principles in general. Pakistan will extend full cooperation in the fight against terrorism. As for the specifics, we expect consultations, and we understand from the news that a group of high-level officials from the United States will be visiting Pakistan in the near future. We would like also to know the plan that the United States has in mind, and then we will discuss what and to what extent Pakistan can be a partner in the fight against terrorism.
Pakistani politics has long been seen as